Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Ford Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserlo.
The Ford Tire Change podcast, ESPN Southwest Louisiana sports station. Dawson Iserlo back with you after a very interesting strategy-related race up in the Pocono Mountains. Ask you to please continue to like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying what you're seeing here. We're rolling along through the summer portion of the NASCAR Cup Series schedule and getting a little bit interesting and dicey as far as playoff spots that are available. And we had a stretch early in the year where guys like William Byron, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson stacked together multiple race wins, and you kind of thought to yourself, all right, are we going to have one of those years where a few guys stack up a bunch of wins and there's a lot of playoff spots available on points? Well, now all of a sudden, we're down to 5 spots for points drivers, 11 taken up by winners, including, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen, who's all the way down in 31st in points, so that's already one spot stolen away. Alex Bowman is the last driver in on points as we stand right now. That, of course, because Chase Briscoe got the job done at Pocono. I said it last week, Pocono is actually one of my favorite races of the year. I just enjoy the difference that Pocono brings. I like that it's oftentimes a fuel mileage strategy-based race. I don't want every race out of 36 of them to be like that, but I think it's okay for 4 or 5 out of the year to come down to different strategies, crew chiefs doing their calculations, being able to play a role in how the race finishes. Now, was this the best Pocono race of all time? Certainly not. It was a little confusing why Briscoe was able to kind of save fuel and also stay up front. I guess it just kind of worked out with him and the way he tried to do the strategy overall. But I do think all in all, this is, it was a different way of running a race. And I think the 19 team was deserving of getting the victory, which is what they did. And it's a big breakthrough for him. Chase going over to Joe Gibbs Racing, being in a better car, the expectations, will rise along with that. And look, he's won before in previous rides in the Cup Series. And he obviously was one of the most dominant drivers when he was in the Xfinity Series. So I never really had the doubt that Briscoe could become a Cup Series contender. But to be in that 19 car and to deliver on a week like this, later in the season, get yourself locked in on a playoff win there, or a win to get yourself into the playoffs, I should say, that's got to be big for them. It does put a little pressure, and I saw this, this kind of narrative going up, Ty Gibbs has some more pressure on him right now in that 54 car. He's got to deliver at some point. It's been an awful season for them. He's capable of winning. He's run in the top 5. He's shown you speed before. I do think it's going to be interesting to see how Gibbs and that race team handle the rest of the season. I mentioned it, 5 spots on points. Guys like Chase Elliott, not in with a win yet. Guys like Bubba Wallace, not in with a win yet. They've got to find a way to make something happen because points are going to get dicey. You still have a week this week in Atlanta. We know it's unpredictable, right? It races like a super speedway. You could have a surprise winner very easily. You've got more road courses. You got the Chicago Street Course. You got to go to Sonoma. You are going to have some tracks that could have some more surprises. And so, I look at somebody like Ryan Preece right now. Yeah, he's only 20 points below the cut line. It's been an awesome season for the number 60 team. But for you to gain those 20 points potentially and then still think in the back of your mind and realize the fact that anytime somebody wins, that line gets bumped up another notch, it's not going to feel good unless you win a race. And that's kind of where I think the mentality has got to be now if you're a bubble driver. Now, if you're Chase Elliott, you're the first of those drivers that are in on points, you probably can feel okay about yourself. Now, the 9 team would love a win. Crazy that at this point in the season, half the Hendrick Motorsports drivers don't have one when you count in Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman. But the 9 team probably feels infinitely better than the 48 team does given their actual situation right now. So as we move this forward into the rest of the season, right, and you take a look at who's maybe in the mix here to win some of these races, to surprise some people, I think the road courses are your first place to look. But you can't go past Atlanta this weekend. And, Atlanta's been so awesome. We've been on a run with that track, right, since this repave. And it was not as settled as, this is going to be awesome when they did it. Remember, I think a lot of us had questions about how it was going to look. Now, the longevity of it, 5-6 years down the road, when that surface ages a little bit, we've still had those questions, and I think we do. But to this point, we haven't really seen those questions play out. It's still been awesome racing. Everything's kind of stayed, and it basically races the way it did when they started it. It is the best super speedway race, arguably, right now, because it doesn't quite have the same fuel-saving elements that Daytona and Talladega have that kind of slow down the action at times. So this is going to be fun. Now, it's going to be swelteringly hot, you'd imagine, right? It's Atlanta. It's the middle of summer. So how does that play a role, right? Track temperatures should be up unless you get a rainy weekend. We'll have to wait and see the forecast. It's NASCAR, so you never know. But, I think going into this weekend, you've got a lot of pressure on that group of 5 drivers, 12 through 16 in the standings right now. And as I mentioned, that includes the likes of Chase Elliott and Bubba Wallace and Alex Bowman, and then you go down the list to the guys who are on the outside looking in, like Ryan Preece and Michael McDowell, and so on and so forth. You've really got to find a way to either win this race or maximize your point situation, and I think going for that win is going to be a real decision that you have to make based on where you are as far as track position is concerned. And the battle of attrition, like as much as I said a couple minutes ago that the 9 team probably feels the best about where they are in a point situation, if he wrecks out early in this race, which is very possible given the high-speed nature of the track, and he loses out and somebody capitalizes behind him with a 35, 40-point day, with stage points and the rest, then he's going to all of a sudden be in a bad spot, moving forward, or at least not in as good of a spot as he is right now. So that's what I love about this part of the season, right? The balance and the battle for points based on, and then that switch over to wins. As I said last week, SVG, who now dropped back down, by the way, to 31st in points, I don't think he should be in with that win. I think it should be at least minimum finish top 30 along with a win. But that's not the rule. So he's in. And, he doesn't have to worry about getting a good finish if he doesn't, I'm sure he's going to try to, right? But that doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all for him. So, let's wait and see. Let's see what happens here. I know there is some news, too, about the, basically the mandating of teams having to release financial information that came out this week. The ongoing legal battles that NASCAR and their teams are involved in. I don't have much more on it. I'm just going to wait and see how this plays out and maybe, have some comment when I have a better idea of what's going to happen. It's just a really, really interesting time in this sport when you consider the fact that the 2311 cars, along with, the same thing going on in Front Row Motorsports, I don't exactly know what to make of it, but for now, they're going to still push ahead, and you wonder, you saw more frustrations, by the way, for Bubba at Pocono, and we know that team's been hanging on. They've been, finding good results, but even Tyler Reddick hasn't quite had the speed that he had at certain points of the year. So it's a big couple of weeks coming up for them. As far as picking a winner in Atlanta, it's not quite Daytona and Talladega, right? We've seen it. It's still going to really pay to have speed. I think that's going to help. It's not as simple as just being in the best position, where sometimes at Daytona and Talladega, it's like, hey, if you survive it and you get there at the end, you're going to have a good shot. I do go back to that year Corey LaJoie ran out front for so many laps, but I think that's going to be harder to do. I'm telling you what, though, Carson Hocevar is going to go for it, man. And he's got speed. That car's been fast. He's itching for a win. He's right there with points as well. He's another driver that's in that consideration we talked about where Ryan Preece and Alex Bowman and those guys are. What if the 77 breaks through this weekend? I'm gonna keep taking Hocevar here and there until it happens because I just feel like he's bound to break through at one point or another. Give me Carson Hocevar to win the race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And I guess now the EchoPark Speedway that they've changed the name of. Got to start getting used to that. But all things considered, look, it should be fun. It's an interesting portion of the schedule. You do also have the start of the in-season challenge that they're calling it. They kind of took the idea from Denny. I don't love the way they decided to seed this thing with the last 3 finishes. But hey, at the end of the day, it is going to be fun to see how this thing plays out. If you don't know what it is, essentially 32 driver bracket. Driver versus driver, best finish in the week wins and moves on to the next week. $1 million for the winner at the end. NASCAR did put out a pretty awesome promotional video that kind of made fun of everything and was really, kind of informative. It's why I know how it's going to work fully. So if your favorite driver's in this thing, you kind of take a look, go, oh, okay, he needs to outrun the 23 car, and he needs to outrun the 19 car just this week. And obviously, a place like Atlanta, this could literally change in the last lap. You could have a guy leading the race that wrecks out, finishes 30th, and it could flip the bracket upside down. So I'm at least going to pay attention to it. Kind of like the in-season tournament in the NBA, kind of like the stuff that Major League, I don't know if it's going to move the needle per se. I don't know if it's going to get people that aren't into it. But it's another thing to keep track of and talk about when you're in a stretch of the season that is pretty long, right? And you get to the dog days of summer. We got the in-season challenge to talk about, and the drivers have a little incentive to try and make this worth their while. It is interesting, too. You've heard different comments. Some guys really all for it. Some guys don't seem to care at all. As we get further into it, and maybe there's 8 drivers left, you might see guys start to care a whole lot more, even if they initially said they weren't all that worried about it. So we'll see what happens at Atlanta. We will be back next week, of course, to recap it all. It's another episode of 4 Tire Change in the books. Dawson Iserlow closing things out. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you next week.